school sports exploits. You can probably tell by looking at me that I was a jock in school. I was on the chess team. And I'll give you one quick story about my high school exploits, and then I'll let Gola tell you some of his, which actually are interesting. I went to Stuyvesant High School in New York City. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with Sty. But my first day at Stuyvesant gives indication of just how tough and cool I was. I was sold by a senior a 6th floor pool pass. Not only did we not have a pool, but we didn't have a 6th floor. So that pretty much encapsulates my entire high school experience.
No, you forgot to say you were cut from the chess team.
I was unfortunately cut from the chess team because I was too unathletic. At one point I castled, and then I leaned back in the chair. You know that moment where you like lean back in the chair and you think it might go over, and then all of a sudden you catch yourself, and I sort of screamed a little, and my mother decided that it was too dangerous for me to play chess.
It was actually more of a shriek like a 4-year-old girl, quite honestly. And, Greeny, I think the big thing with this show is the mix of athlete and whatever that is. I mean, it literally was athletic career. I was the jock who played, and he was the guy who brought me a towel and a drink. And that's kind of how it worked. And kind of how it still works, actually, during the breaks. We kind of go that route. So listen, my high school years, you guys were, this is the time. And congrats on the victory over Xavier. Good job. I understand we take care of, West Haven on Thanksgiving. We're in the playoffs. Yep. That's good. And congrats, I know he's out here somewhere. I know if you stand, you see the big 7-footer going to Providence, I believe. Obviously some stories to tell about our show, but I think this is fantastic, what I see here with the father-son sports night, and as was talked about, it's not always about sports. What a great father-son, just time together. My father, I have two older brothers, my brother Bob and Greg, and we all played sports, and my father, both my parents, but since it's father and son, my father was there all the time for everything, and it was so important. I never ever forgot that, and as my kids went through their sports, I made sure that I was there all the time. So Greeny is doing the same thing. His son plays sports and he coaches them, and I love doing that. And I remember when my dad first got into sports, when he was going to coach us. My father played football. He was an offensive lineman. Then he was also in the Marines. He was 6'4". At this point, he was probably 6'4", about 255, with that Marine cut, and he looked really mean. And my brother Bob was about 10 years old, and he said, "Dad, I want to play football." So my dad proceeded to tell him all the things that could happen to him when he played football. He said, "You'll get kicked, you'll get bit, you'll get punched, you'll break bones, you'll tear ligaments," all the things that would maybe scare you and say, "Do you still want to play?" And he said, "Yeah, I still wanted to play." So my dad took him down to the field. Practice was going on with the Little League, and my dad walked up to the coach at a break, and he said, I forgot what the guy's name was, but he said, "This is my son Mike, he wants to play. My name is Bob Golick Sr., and I'm the new coach." And the guy just, "Okay, welcome. Here's the whistle and the hat." So, but it was just his way of wanting to be involved, and he was ever since in everything, and that's why I love seeing this. The fathers and sons, the involvement that you have, whether, forgetting if it's just sports, just in any part of your kid's activity. I know I loved it as a kid, and as a father, there was nothing that would keep me away from my sons. Even my daughter said, my last one up, she's a sophomore in college, a swimmer in Notre Dame, but that would keep me from them. So I really applaud you and look up to you for doing this, having this, and being such a big part of your son's lives.
I certainly echo that sentiment. Mike and I are both from sports families, slightly different sports families. Mike is his dad played football, he and his brothers played football, his sons played football. I'm from a Jewish sports family, so we had season tickets. So, but in some ways, sports was an equally significant part of my life growing up. That, to this day, is how my dad, 81 years old, I talked to him today, and we spent 20 minutes on the phone talking about what an idiot Rex Ryan is. Anyone share that sentiment? I would say, I speak to my father on the phone 5 times a week. I would say 4.5 times is about the Jets. At some point I say, how's mom? But that is the way that we relate to each other, the way we've always related to each other. I've told the story on the air many times, and the older, the dads in this room may remember, especially if you're a Jet fan, 1987, January, at Cleveland, leading by 10 points late in the 4th quarter of a playoff game. My father is on the phone with United Airlines booking a flight to Denver for the AFC Championship game. Mark Gastineau roughs the quarterback. We wound up on a 4th down. We wound up losing a double overtime. And at some point, a pillow wound up sailing out a 25th story window. We're very fortunate that no one was killed.
That's the aggression in the Greenberg house. They throw pillows.
So that pretty much worked. And the other thing that obviously here, I'm sure a lot of the young men in the room are interested in a career in sports broadcasting, which has become an increasingly popular field. And just as Mike and I came at this from different ways, I also give 2 different pieces of advice. When people say to me, how can I go about becoming a sports broadcaster, my first piece of advice is always, play 9 years in the NFL. Because then you can be the host of the #1 sports talk show in America, even if you can neither read nor write. I mean that.
Wait, you added that line. Usually that line's not in there.
Well, usually you're not with me.
Oh.
I do a lot of this.
I was going to say, you're adding lines and I'm not around.
Well, that's why I'm stepping further and further from you on the stage. But the evidence of that was presented, and Sean will speak to this. We do have one policy on the show that is a hard, fast rule, and that rule is called Greeny must approve all breaking news.
This was not my fault. As you'll see, it was not. I had a perfectly rational explanation for what went on.
2004, sitting there doing the show, minding my own business, talking about something, and all of a sudden Golik says, Greeny.
See, this is the beautiful thing when we do the show. If you're ever watching on TV sometimes and you see him talking or me talking and the other one on the computer, we're basically not listening to one another, is what goes on.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Exactly. So he was talking one time, I wasn't listening, I was going over actually world news, quite honestly. I think what he was talking about was pretty boring. So I was looking over world news and I came across a piece of information.
And he says to me, Greeny, we got major breaking news.
I did this on air.
Colin Powell has re-signed. So I said, what? So I turned and looked at the computer, and there it was, Associated Press News Bulletin, Secretary of State Colin Powell resigned.
Who spells it the same? I thought he resigned. It wasn't a good moment. There were retractions and apologies and, you know.
Golik was looking for the signing bonus. I said, Mike, did you think you got an offer from another nation? So recently I had a little fun with this. About a year ago, as everyone in this room is obviously well aware, the Pope resigned. So I said, hey Mike, I heard there's big news. The Pope resigned? My people made him an offer. So anyway, those are some of the ways that you can go about trying to become a broadcaster. The other route, there's met a nice gentleman here whose daughter went to the Medill School of Journalism at Northwestern. Obviously, education is the first and best way to get to this point if 9 years in the NFL aren't a realistic option. And then things that we can talk about this later, we'll spend some time with questions, things like internships and opportunities. It is my belief that there are some things you can learn in school. There are some professions you have to learn how to do them in a classroom. And then there are some things you just have to do. There's really no way to learn how to be on the air without being on the air. So that's my first and foremost piece of advice for all the students.
I would agree with that. Just like anybody who plays sports, how do you get better at something? You take reps over and over and over and over and over again, reps with the proper technique. That's the same thing. When I went into this business, I had never done it. I didn't go to school for it. They didn't have journalism or communications at Notre Dame. I went on and I played football, and then I got into this. It was just a matter of doing reps. There were, times I speak so much better now. I used to not talk so good. Now I'm so much better. You should have seen me when we first started.
necessarily his
No.
first.
I think it's overrated.
As I've said many times, Mr. Golick speaks only one language, and even that one, not so well. But at any rate, I do think it is important that you all recognize the greatness that is in this room, and we should spend a few moments.
I would hope you were going to get to that.
I think we should. We should spend a few minutes on Mr. Golick's pro football career. So Mike played 9 years in the NFL. During that time, he amassed 11 quarterback sacks.
11 and a half quarterback sacks.
That's an average of a little less than 1.5 per year.
Some call that not a lot. I call it consistent.
I call it less than 2 more than I had, and I didn't even play. He also did have, however, it should be pointed out, 3 interceptions.
Three
interceptions.
As a defensive lineman. Seriously? That's an athlete.
He was tackled by the quarterback all 3 times.
They had the angle on him.
I think we should analyze those moments if we could. Think about some of the legendary quarterbacks that took Mike down.
Hall of Famers.
Don Majkowski.
Maybe not him.
Anybody remember the Magic Man? The next one was the ever athletic Troy Aikman.
See, yeah, that was a bad one. You know, it was one of those where I dropped into coverage, zone blitz, so I occupy the guard and drop into coverage, and he gets, I got Reggie White, Jerome Brown, and Clyde Simmons rushing, so they're getting pressure on him, and he just kind of throws the ball, and I picked it up. I had 25 yards of green artificial turf in front of me, and I was scoring. And Troy Aikman did have the angle on me, but he may have thrown the worst attempted tackle known to mankind. He actually dove at my legs 5 yards early. So in fact, by the time I got to him, he was prone on the ground, almost knocked himself out when he hit the ground. I could have literally done this and ran the other 10 yards into the end zone. I tripped over him. That was it.
The third quarterback who tackled Mike Golick was Jim Everett.
Jim Everett.
Who in last scene, this is how tough he was beaten up by Jim Wrong. So I don't think all things considered, those are the most memorable moments. But I mean, it is 3 more interceptions, you know, for example, than I have.
Yeah.
So I think that's all things considered a positive achievement. And some of my favorite moments, I think my favorite of the stories that you tell regularly about your playing career took place when you were playing in high school, or maybe it was even in like Little League.
Oh, Little League.
Yeah, at the time you had when you were running and the cheerleaders were there.
People always say, you know, what was one of your most embarrassing moments playing? And they might think it's something at Notre Dame or something with one of the teams that I played with in the NFL. I was actually in Little League. I was about 10 years old, and I was playing quarterback for our town team. And I was quarterback, and we ran like an option. And the one time we ran an option really well. I faked it into the line, and everybody thought the guy had it. So I went around then, and nobody was around me. Now, 2 things here. I was free running to the end zone. That's number 1. Number 2 is there was no way on God's green earth I was going to make it, because I just wasn't fast enough. So, but I was bigger than everybody. So when I'm running kind of close to the sideline. The first guy kind of runs at me and dives at me and gets me around the waist. And I kind of shrug him off. But when I shrug him off, he continues to hang on to my pants. So as I shrug him and he falls off, my pants come down to my ankles. And he lets go. So now my pants are at my ankles, so I just keep running. I'm running like that down the sideline. So of course everybody else caught me, and they knocked me out of bounds, and I went flying back, and as I looked up, they had knocked me right into the cheerleaders. So you're 10 years old, you're sitting there with your pants down right in front of the cheerleaders. It's not a great moment.
That's one of my favorite stories. That's the kind of thing that would happen to me and didn't. So I'm thrilled. Over the years, we've had many wonderful opportunities to do a lot of really cool things together. We were guests of President George W. Bush at the White House. We spent an afternoon and an evening at the White House. That was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun, yeah.
And then we have...
I stole 2 things out of the White House. Still haven't been caught.
What were they?
I'm not telling.
That was a great day. We've been on the David Letterman Show 10 times. One of the great memories that I have of our career was the first time we were on the David Letterman Show.
Let's spin it forward to a preseason game against the Detroit Lions with a really, really dumb right offensive tackle. A youngin', big guy, 6'8", probably about 6'8", 300 pounds or so. And, you know, everybody got a little attitude at that. This is a preseason game, mind you. So we finished the play, and Reggie, you know, the guy actually was holding Reggie, which is what people normally do to try and block Reggie. And Reggie just, stop holding me. That simple. This dude went into a swearing-filled tirade, calling Reggie every name in the book while pointing at him, calling him every word you could think of. And Reggie his steam is coming out. And all you hear him say is, don't you cuss me! Don't you cuss me! And you know, the more he's saying that, the more this, you know, testosterone-filled young man is swearing at Reggie. And Reggie's now losing his mind. We're grabbing, don't you ever cuss me! Don't you cuss me! And then the guy keeps swearing at him, and Reggie just calms down, and he said, okay, Jesus is coming. And we were all like, oh, this is going to be good. So we get back in the huddle, and why I remind you that it's a preseason game, which means it doesn't count. So they break the huddle, we're at the line. There's Reggie, there's me, there's Jerome Brown, there's Clyde Simmons. We, the three of us, Reggie's over here with steam still coming out of his ears. We are here, the offensive line is here. We just said, guys, we're not doing nothing. And they were like, we aren't either. We want to see this. I kid you not. I kid you not. We were just brother-in-law. So, and I'm next to Reggie, so I'm in my stance like this. Yeah, the other dude's in his stance like this. So the quarterback's calling the cadence. Now, only the linemen really know what's going on here. Quarterback starts calling the cadence. Reggie's in his stance. Jesus is coming. Jesus is coming. I'm sitting there going, oh God, it's going to be good. The lineman over here is like, oh, I'm glad it's not on me. We're all just watching. Jesus is coming. Jesus is coming. Spit the whole thing. Right as the quarterback's hitting the cadence, you hear Reggie go, here comes Jesus. Right on the snap of the ball. All three of us are like, the old line is like, I kid you not, Reggie caught him in the chest plate. You guys playing football, you know, in the chest plate, and actually lifted him as he drove him into, I kid you not, to the quarterback. He sacked the quarterback with him. I'm not making it up. He lifted him, threw him into the quarterback. The quarterback's on the ground, the lineman's on the ground. He said, don't you ever cuss me again. I turned around and walked away, and we were like, wow.
I have absolutely no similar life experience to that whatsoever. I did once host a game show on the ABC network called Duel. Raise your hand if you saw it. I know. Don't lie.
Oh my God, really?
One critic wrote that it was cold Duel because the only two people in America who watched it shot each other. Tom Shales in the Washington Post wrote, and I quote, Mike Greenberg is to hosting game shows what Michael Vick is to hosting dog shows. So that was, I've been working on my stuff.
Yeah.
We haven't done this in 7 years. But anyway, I thought that we would address a couple of the real sports topics of the day before we open it up to some questions. And obviously, I'm sure for a lot of the young athletes in this room and a lot of the parents in this room, things like concussion and head trauma and all of those concerns are very big. Now, I'm sure many of you are aware that the Patriots, any Patriot fans in the room? Paul, go ahead. Playing the Panthers tonight, Monday Night Football. We all want to get home in time to watch most of that game. So, we're going to open up for some questions for a little while here, and then we'll be on our way. Tonight, by the way, I saw a statistic I was coming over here. Tom Brady and Bill Belichick will tonight set a record for most games played as a head coach and quarterback tandem in NFL history. 185 games together. And that'll be number one all the time. There's no reason to clap for that. They're not in the room.
Here's your greenest Jet fan that's coming out.
I just thought it was an interesting little aside. Bill Belichick is a former Jets head coach. He was the HC of the NYJ for, I think, 21 hours in 2001. All right, we're going to open up for questions. Stand and yell, by all means. And don't be shy.
One of the times we had on for an hour, and it was Bill Cosby, who is, certainly a sports guy, running track at Temple. He's very big in sports enthusiast, but also just where else he went in the world as well was, we were really, really impressed with him very much.
He'd be right up there. We've had, we had, during the election, we had President Obama, we had Senator McCain when he was running. That was exciting. I thought talking to them.
It's kind of fun when we go outside, interviewing athletes, it's a cool thing, but when you go outside that world with some big names, it's a lot of fun.
They were playing John Bon Jovi's music earlier tonight when we were getting ready. He was an owner in the Arena Football League for many years, and Mike and I did one year, we did the games, so we got to spend a lot of time around him. That was always a lot of fun.
Yep.
Meeting the people who were sort of outside the sports world, I think is always a little bit of a treat. But generally, we always answer that question by pointing to Cosby. That was an unbelievable act.
Meanest on our show. We asked him, what motivates you? He said, fear. Fear of letting down the guy next to me. Fear of letting down my teammate. So to me, these are some of the greatest foundation builders there are. Learning to play for the guy next to you. Learning to come back yourself from anything, however you get knocked down, as I mentioned, spiritually, emotionally, physically, mentally, and getting back up from that. You don't know how much that will carry you in the real world. It will seem easier to you by doing it now and having some of the things you have to come back from. That when you're in the world working, to come back from that because of what you did as an athlete and what you learn of work ethic and values. The biggest thing to me is work ethic and playing for the guy next to me. Greeny and I joke a lot with each other, how we mess around with one another. But I take a ball for him in a minute. In a minute, you just learn to play well with your teammates and learn to play off your teammates and what they mean to you to help the cause. And that will carry you forever when you're a teammate on an actual team or you're a teammate in a company somewhere.
I would not take a bullet for him. I appreciate the thought.
And that's the amazing thing. I still would, even though I know he would die.
I guess the message here is if anyone in the room is packing and you're planning on shooting one of us, both of us agree it should be him.
See when I try and get nice what happens? Go ahead, way in the back, my man. Jump up. What do you got? What do we think about Geno Smith and will he improve? Geno Smith's a rookie right now. Sometimes he looks really good and sometimes he looks like a really bad rookie. I do like him. I would go on with him, but it is tough to watch at times. But everybody got spoiled last year with RG3 and Russell Wilson and Andrew Luck. Doesn't happen like that all the time, for the most part. And even Andrew Luck threw a lot of interceptions. It's going to happen. I like Geno Smith, and I would stick with him.
As a fan of the team, I generally like him too, and I think he is at a huge disadvantage. The Jets do not have a lot of talent at the wide receiver position. And about 2 or 3 games in which he's looked really bad, including yesterday, I thought their offensive line had a very tough time. They got dominated. He had an enormous pass rush yesterday. Actually, the guy who does stats for us at ESPN's got Dean Oliver. Dean sent me a note because I talked about it today that the Jet pass rush actually was the second worst. Their offensive line against the pass rush yesterday by some statistical measure was the second worst in the NFL this year based upon the number of pressures they allowed. So it's not all exclusively his fault. That said, he's had some games where he's just looked awful, lost, horrible. And what I don't like is that when things start going bad, instead of getting better, it tends to snowball. He starts just throwing inexplicable interceptions. So I'm by no means jumping off the bandwagon, but I'm a little less enthusiastic than I was, even after the New Orleans win. I'm a little less enthusiastic than I was 3 or 4 weeks ago. We've got time for a couple more quickly. Let's try as many students as we can.
Right there, go
ahead. One of the biggest issues in baseball right now is the biogenesis scandal surrounding A-Rod. In your opinion, do you think he will be suspended? And if so, how?
A-Rod, do we think A-Rod will be suspended? Well, right now he's suspended for 211 games. He's going through his appeal. Both Greeny and I, because we don't really know the 211 came from the rest of this year and all of next year. And that was the thought. We both think it'll go down to probably a year, probably 162. He'll definitely be suspended, but not for the 211.
If it winds up being less than 162, then I think baseball loses. If you're sort of judging this as baseball versus A-Rod, I think that's the measuring stick. I think there's no way for 211 to stand up, as Mike said. It's a random number. I think anything less than a season, baseball loses. And my gut feeling is that it'll wind up being exactly that. It'll wind up being a season. By the way, I'll just add this, because people are talking about it now, and I was looking through some notes. Anyone who gives Robinson Cano $310 million to play baseball deserves what will then happen to their franchise as a result of it. Any Yankee fans in the room? Right, I love the Yankees. I'm a Yankee fan. Both my parents are from the Bronx. I love the Yankees. Do you think if they give him $300 million just once, he'll run hard to first base after hitting the ball just once? Do you think for $300 million? Do you think he would actually dive for a ball? He has as much skill as any second baseman I've ever seen in my entire life. But let's face it, he doesn't play hard. And you'd think that, for $300 million, you could expect at least that. So I'm very against the Yankees giving him $310 million.
Good enough? Stu? Yeah, go ahead.
First job in sports broadcasting?
Oh, for me? For me, it was when I retired in '94 from the NFL. I had been doing some things for ESPN before that. So when I finished that, I did some college games for ESPN. And in 1995, the Jacksonville Jaguars came into being. That's when they were formed. I ended up doing their preseason TV games. That was the first time I was ever really, as a job, behind a microphone.
My first professional jobs in the broadcasting business were markedly less glamorous than that. I was a part-time news production assistant at WMAQ Radio in Chicago.
Ooh, tell us more.
Which at that time was, for those of you who know WINS here in New York, you give us 22 minutes, we'll give you the world. That was the Chicago version of that station. I got paid $4.75 an hour to get the anchors coffee. This is how long ago it was. There was no internet then. So with the anchors, I would call the National Weather Service once an hour to update the temperatures so they could read the temperatures and stuff like that. My first year out of college, I made $10,800. And now I make almost double that.
There's not one student in here that heard anything after there was no internet then.
No internet.
You're like, what?
No internet. There were no cell phones. No cell phones. There was microwaves though. We have time for one more, and then we got to go to the picture. Go ahead. Students, who's in? Go ahead. There's two more students, 1 and 2. Go ahead.
What do you think about the NBA team tanking for the draft pick?
NBA teams tanking for the draft pick.
Let's talk about that after I have a whole philosophy.
Reedy's got
a whole plan. The long and short of it is, it's a disgrace and they do it, and the reason they do it is because they incentivize teams to lose. It is now advantageous to lose, which is ridiculous, and what I believe they should do is they should give the first pick in the draft to the team with the best record that misses the playoffs, and then go in inverse order. And that's the Greedy plan, and I don't know why in the world they haven't adopted it yet. I believe
it won't happen, but it's actually an interesting idea.
Go ahead. Last one.
What's the best sporting event or game either of you've been to?
It's a good question. I'll give a little different answer because it was just something unusual. I mean, I'm speaking for Mike. I've been to Super Bowls and All-Star games and World Series, and it's all fabulous. I would say, two things. I'm a tennis fan. I grew up as a tennis player, so I was at Wimbledon, and that was spectacular. That just felt wonderful to see it, to see the court and everything else. It's so much smaller than I expected it to be. But in 1994, the World Cup was in the United States, and I was working in Chicago at that time. And they held the opening ceremonies and a few games there at Soldier Field, and I covered the opening ceremony and a few games. And seeing the extraordinary passion and international flavor of the people who were there. I mean, if there were 90,000 people in the stadium that they probably represented 90 different countries. It was incredible. That was certainly a unique experience. I don't know that it was the greatest sporting event I've ever been to, but it was one of the most memorable experiences. So I'll just say that.
What I was involved with, I was a wrestler up through college, but in high school, my junior year, I got selected to wrestle against a national team from Russia. And I'd never done that before, and it turned out my brother Bob wrestled on the same team with me, and we both wrestled their heavyweights. So we tried to decide which one we wanted to wrestle. Bob would get the better one, he was a better wrestler than me, and we chose wrong. I got the Russian junior national champion, and he threw me all over the gym. But it was an experience. And then I would say the one I was at, because it involved my daughter, when she was 14, she was a nationally ranked swimmer. She really, as I said, she swims at Notre Dame. But at 14, she was nationally ranked. in more than a few events, and she, you know, had those kind of Olympic aspirations at that age, and we went together to watch the Olympic trials. And while that wasn't, obviously it wasn't even the Olympics, but to be there with her, knowing kind of what she was trying to aspire to do, and to see what it took, and the people that were involved in it, it was that was one of the better father-daughter trips I've ever had.
Anyway, we look forward to coming back in 7 years like clockwork. Every 7 years, so set your calendars now. It'll be a Tuesday in November in the year 2020.
Yes.
So we look forward to that. And all kidding aside, and I would echo what Mike said earlier, to have an evening like this for fathers and sons. We are both fathers and sons. And so it's a wonderful event, a wonderful school. It's an honor for us to be here. So thank you all very much.
Good luck.